One teacher's chuckle nearly crushed a kid's spirit, until the truth showed up with a NASA badge. You ever have a moment that changes the whole atmosphere of a room? A single sentence, a quick laugh, and suddenly everything feels different. That's what happened one Thursday morning in Miss Haywood's third-grade classroom at Maple Ridge Elementary, tucked in a quiet suburb of Austin, Texas. It was Career Week, one of those yearly events where kids sit on the reading rug, wide-eyed, while parents filter in to talk about what they do. Firefighters, bakers, software developers, each one with a prop in hand and a story to tell. 8-year-old Elijah Carter could hardly sit still. Small for his age, but endlessly curious, Elijah had this way of talking that made even the simplest things sound important. And today mattered, because his dad was coming. So when Miss Haywood asked the class to go around and share what their parents did, Elijah sat up a little taller. He had practiced this, rehearsed it the night before in front of the mirror. "My dad," he said proudly, "works at NASA." The room paused. Not the kind of pause that invites follow-up questions, the kind that's laced with disbelief. One kid muttered, "No way." Another snorted. But it was Mr. Langston, the classroom aide, who delivered the gut punch. Late 30s, button-up shirt tucked neatly into slacks, glasses perched on his nose. He let out a short laugh. Not loud, not cruel, but sharp enough to sting. "NASA?" he asked, eyebrows raised. "You sure about that, Elijah? That's a pretty big claim." It wasn't what he said, it was how he said it, like Elijah had just announced his dad was Batman. A couple of kids giggled. One girl whispered, "He's joking, right?" And just like that, Elijah shrank. His back curved. His hands, which had been animated just seconds before, now sat still in his lap. He didn't say another word. Mr. Langston moved on, unfazed, unaware of how his quick comment had landed like a weight on a little boy's chest. But someone noticed. Riley, the girl who sat next to Elijah, leaned in and whispered, "I believe you." Elijah didn't respond. He just kept his eyes on the floor. The rest of the morning passed in a blur. Kids clapped for Chloe's mom, who ran a cupcake shop. They cheered for Jackson's dad, who drove a tow truck and let the class honk the horn on his little model rig. But Elijah, he stayed quiet. He picked at his sandwich during lunch, didn't laugh when the boys at the vending machines did their goofy robot dances, didn't race anyone to the swings like he usually did, because something inside him had shifted. It wasn't just the laugh. It wasn't even the doubt. It was how quickly an adult, someone supposed to lift kids up, had dismissed him without blinking. But what Mr. Langston didn't know was that Elijah hadn't made anything up. Every word he said was true. His father was an aerospace engineer, working on deep space communication systems. He did wear a NASA badge every single day. Elijah wasn't guessing. He wasn't pretending. He had been so proud. Now, none of it seemed to matter. 3 days before Career Week, Elijah had been in the garage with his dad, surrounded by tangled wires, dusty toolboxes, and boxes full of forgotten circuit boards. Technically, Elijah was helping, but mostly he was just watching. Perched on an old camping cooler, sipping a fruit punch Capri Sun, and tossing out questions faster than his dad could answer them. "So, if the satellite's all the way by Mars, how long does it take to send a message?" Dr. Marcus Carter, tall, soft-spoken with warm eyes behind thick black-rimmed glasses, didn't look up from the mess of cables in his hands. "Depends on where Mars is in orbit. Could be 5 minutes, sometimes 20. Elijah's eyes widened. "So it's like texting with really bad service?" Marcus laughed, the kind of laugh that made Elijah feel like a genius. Exactly like that. Space has the worst Wi-Fi. That was Elijah's favorite kind of moment. Just the two of them. No speeches, no lectures. Just ordinary time made magical because of how his dad explained things. Science wasn't scary when Marcus talked about it. It was like a secret language they both knew. Later that night, Elijah tiptoed into his dad's office and asked, "Can I bring this to class?" He held up a folder stamped with a NASA logo. Marcus looked over, took the folder gently from his son's hands and sighed. "I'd love for you to. But most of this stuff is classified, not really show-and-tell material." Elijah frowned. "Not even one page?" Marcus smiled and sat beside him on the edge of the bed. "You don't need the folder. You've got your voice. Just tell them what I do and tell them you're proud." Elijah hesitated. "But what if they don't believe me?" Marcus leaned back on one elbow. He wasn't the type to sugarcoat. He'd lived long enough to know that not everyone sees the world through a wide enough lens. "If they don't," he said softly, "that's their problem, not yours." Elijah bit his lip. "What if they laugh?" Marcus paused. "Then you keep your head up, because the truth doesn't need everyone to clap. It just needs someone brave enough to say it out loud." That stuck with Elijah. He didn't totally understand it, but it felt important. He spent the rest of the night working on a little poster, drawing a rocket, writing out words like orbit, rover, and satellite in bubble letters. He practiced in the mirror the next morning. Even added a joke about space Wi-Fi, but all of that disappeared in an instant when Mr. Langston laughed. At lunch, Elijah ripped the poster in half and shoved it deep into his backpack. He didn't say anything, didn't cry, he just shut down. It's strange how fast pride can crumble into embarrassment. 1 second, you're ready to share your hero with the world. The next, you're wondering if maybe you dreamed it all up. Back at Maple Ridge Elementary, Elijah sat through the rest of the day like a shadow of himself. Spelling quizzes, group math problems, story time. It all blurred together. He didn't raise his hand once, barely spoke, just tapped the edge of his pencil against his desk and kept glancing at the clock. Career presentations were scheduled for the last hour of the day. "Please show up, Dad," he thought. "Please." Meanwhile, Dr. Marcus Carter was across town, wrapping up a back-to-back meeting marathon at the NASA Deep Space Operations Center. His desktop was cluttered with diagrams, telemetry maps, and one final slide for his presentation. A photo of him and Elijah, side by side at the Jet Propulsion Lab, both grinning under their matching ID badges. No props, no showboating, just them. That was the image he wanted to leave the class with. At school, Elijah couldn't stop watching the door. Every time it creaked or someone walked by, his stomach flipped. What if his dad got stuck in traffic? What if he had to cancel? What if, worst of all, Mr. Langston was right? Those doubts, the ones that sneak in when you're small and someone older makes you feel even smaller, they started to whisper louder. What if your dad doesn't come? What if he's not who you think he is? Elijah shook his head, trying to block them out. But the thought stuck like gum on the bottom of a shoe. At the front of the class, Mr. Langston had settled back into his rhythm, clipboard in hand, calling in parents one by one from the hallway. Chloe's mom passed out tiny cupcakes. Mateo's aunt brought a plastic skeleton to talk about being a physical therapist. The kids cheered, asked questions, took pictures, and Elijah sat there, hands clammy, knees bouncing, heart pounding in a steady beat of hope and fear. He imagined the moment like a scene from a movie. The door would open, his dad would walk in wearing that dark blue NASA blazer, badge gleaming, calm and confident. The room would go silent. Mr. Langston's smirk would disappear. The kids would look at Elijah with wide eyes, but deep down, Elijah wasn't sure anymore. Mr. Langston scanned the list, then paused. Next, we have... The door opened before he could finish. And there he was. Dr. Marcus Carter stepped into the room, tall, composed, wearing a crisp blazer over a white shirt, NASA badge clipped to his chest, and a presence that made the air still. Elijah sat up so fast, his chair scraped the floor. His mouth opened, but no words came out. Marcus met his son's eyes and gave the slightest nod, not a big smile. No dramatic entrance, just that quiet strength that said, "I'm here." "Good afternoon," he said, voice smooth and steady. "I'm Dr. Carter. I design spacecraft systems for NASA." The room didn't gasp. It didn't erupt in cheers. It just froze. Not with doubt, with realization. One person, though, wasn't ready to process what he was seeing. Mr. Langston, still holding his clipboard, eyes wide, mouth slightly ajar like someone who suddenly regretted a joke that had gone too far. Dr. Carter didn't bring props. Didn't need flashy visuals or a smoke machine. Just his voice, his badge, his presence, and the undeniable fact that he belonged in a space few expected him to occupy. He looked around the room, calm and steady. "So, I hear you all are learning about different careers." A few kids nodded, wide-eyed. One boy raised his hand. "Do you fly rockets?" Marcus smiled. "Not quite. I help build the systems that allow rockets to talk to us after they leave Earth. Think of it like space phones." Another kid lit up. "Like iPhones in space?" Marcus chuckled. "Sure, but with terrible reception." That got a real laugh. Even Elijah smiled, shoulders relaxing for the first time all day. Marcus clicked a remote, and an image appeared on the screen behind him. A Mars satellite relay system in deep orbit. Another photo showed him at a console, hands on a control panel lit up like a Christmas tree. "What you're looking at," he said, "is how we stay connected to robots exploring another planet. We make sure they can call home, even from 140 million miles away." The class leaned in. Every kid, even the ones who'd smirked earlier. But off to the side, Mr. Langston stood stiff, silent. His usual ease, his air of control, it was gone, replaced by something closer to discomfort. He glanced at Elijah, whose whole posture had changed. He wasn't just sitting now. He was present, engaged, proud. Marcus never once mentioned the earlier moment, never called it out. He didn't need to. His presence alone had rewritten the story. But just before wrapping up, he paused, looked directly at the class, then let his eyes land on Mr. Langston. "I heard someone earlier say that working at NASA might be unrealistic." He let the word linger, quietly, firmly. He turned to Elijah. "Well," he said, voice calm, "I suppose some people have different definitions of what's realistic." And then, finally, he smiled. Elijah beamed, really beamed, not just with relief, but with something deeper. That feeling you get when someone you love shows up exactly when you needed them most. The look on some of the kids' faces had changed, too. Admiration, curiosity. Even the girl who'd laughed earlier now leaned forward, eyes wide, mouth slightly open. Riley leaned over and whispered, "Told you." Mr. Langston cleared his throat. "Well, thank you, Dr. Carter. That was very informative." Marcus gave a small nod. "Of course, I've got to get back. Mars doesn't like being put on hold." A few kids laughed again. As he passed Mr. Langston on the way out, he paused, just for a beat. Not long, not loud, just enough. "I hope your students always feel heard," he said softly, "especially the ones who dream big." and with that, he was gone. But what he left behind? That stayed. Mr. Langston stood frozen, clipboard dangling at his side. The kids weren't looking at him anymore. They were looking at Elijah. And Elijah? He wasn't grinning or puffing his chest out. He just sat quietly, shoulders relaxed, chin slightly lifted. The weight he'd been carrying all day had finally lifted. Mr. Langston cleared his throat. "Let's thank Dr. Carter for coming." The room clapped. Not just polite claps, real ones. And some of those eyes that had rolled hours earlier were now wide with something new. Respect. After the last parent left, the day moved on like it always did. But something had shifted. No one really cared about cupcakes or tire gauges anymore. They'd seen something real. When the bell rang, kids rushed out, backpacks bouncing. But Elijah stayed seated. Mr. Langston approached, slower this time. "Hey," he said, voice softer. "Your dad's a pretty smart guy." Elijah looked up. "He is." Langston nodded. "I might have been out of line earlier." Elijah didn't respond. "What I meant to say is, sometimes adults mess up. We say things that land wrong, and sometimes we laugh when we shouldn't." Elijah held his gaze. "You did laugh." Langston's face tightened. "Yeah, and I'm sorry. That wasn't fair to you." There was a pause. Then Elijah stood, slung his backpack over one shoulder. As he reached the door, he looked back. "That really is my dad." And then he walked out. That night, Elijah sat at the kitchen table with a bowl of cereal, dinner by choice. Across from him, Dr. Carter leaned against the counter, sipping from his old mug with the faded words "Space Nerd." After a long silence, Elijah looked up. He laughed. "When I said you worked at NASA, Marcus didn't flinch." "Yeah, I heard. Why do people do that?" "Because sometimes they've never seen someone like you, or me, do something big, so they shrink it. Laugh at it." Elijah stirred his cereal. "It made me feel dumb." Marcus leaned in. "Don't ever let someone else's small thinking erase your truth. You know who you are, and you were brave to say it." Elijah nodded slowly. The next day, things were different. Kids who had laughed now wanted to sit near Elijah. One asked if his dad had met an astronaut. Another wanted to know if space phones were real. Elijah didn't show off, just answered and moved on. At recess, Riley walked beside him. "They believe you now?" she said. He shrugged. They didn't have to. She smiled. Still nice, though. Later, tucked into Elijah's cubby was a folded note. "Elijah, I was wrong. You shouldn't have had to prove anything to us. Keep dreaming big. Mr. Langston." Elijah didn't smile. Didn't read it twice. Just folded it, slid it into his backpack and zipped it shut. He hadn't needed the apology, but maybe someone else had needed to say it. That afternoon, Elijah stepped into the sunlight, head high, not because others finally believed him, but because he never stopped believing in himself. And somewhere inside that classroom, a teacher had been reminded, kids carry dreams bigger than most adults' expectations. And when we laugh at those dreams, we don't just shrink their imagination. We shrink their voice. But Elijah's? His voice stayed strong. Because the truth doesn't need applause. It just needs someone brave enough to say it out loud.